If you're watching this, you probably want to improve your digestion, but you don't want to have to restrict your diet and you don't want to have to shell out money on expensive supplements. This video is for you. For those of you that are new here, my name is Dr. Gonzalez. I'm a naturopathic physician, aka the Good Gut Doc, and today I will be talking about all these different tips that can help enhance your digestion. So stick around and make sure you subscribe. So I'm going to be talking about 7 tips that can begin to improve your digestion today that, yes, are free. They're very simple to do. You may have heard of some, and some may come as brand news to you. So let's get into it. These are tips I share with almost every patient, even if they're not having digestive symptoms, because having good digestion is honestly key to having good overall health. How well we digest our food determines how well we absorb nutrients, and those nutrients go on and have other roles when it comes to so many other things in our body. So before we get into the tips, we really need to do a crash course on the nervous system. So you have your autonomic nervous system, which gets split up into 2 different categories. That's parasympathetic mode and sympathetic mode. So the parasympathetic mode is where we want to be like 99% of the time, and that's also called rest and digest mode. Versus sympathetic nervous system is called fight or flight, which you really only want to get in when you actually need to fight or flight or when there's an actual stressor. Problem is, a lot of us are actually living in sympathetic overdrive or chronic fight or flight. Your body doesn't really know the difference between meeting a deadline, getting all your work done versus escaping a lion or running away from a bear. So if you're always having this adrenaline rush, it's going to be really hard to be in parasympathetic or rest and digest mode. What I share with patients is you can either be in sympathetic or parasympathetic mode. It's really impossible to be in both at the same time. So when you're in sympathetic mode or fight or flight, your body is not prioritizing digestion. It's prioritizing your endurance, your strength, your ability to run away. So digestion, it's going to come to a halt essentially. Versus parasympathetic mode, where your body feels safe enough to be able to digest your food, and that begins in your mouth. It begins with salivation. Your stomach will secrete digestive enzymes to break down that food and that meal, and then your gut motility will activate after you've eaten to start processing that meal and kind of move everything down and out. So you already know where this is going. In order to really enhance digestion, you want to try to get into parasympathetic mode as best as you can. And you might think it's not as easy as snapping your fingers and making stress disappear and just being calm and happy and eating your meal. But there are certain things that can actually help to hack your nervous system to induce parasympathetic mode, and that is by activating your vagus nerve. So your vagus nerve is also known as cranial nerve number 10, and it actually innervates your digestive organs. The vagus nerve travels over your voice box, so anything that causes vibration here will actually activate that vagus nerve. So what can we do to activate that vagus nerve? Well, you can hum, you can gargle, you can sing, you can laugh, you can let out a deep sigh. So I typically recommend patients do some rounds of deep inhalation followed by exhalation, like that feels so good. Maybe do that like 4 or 5 times before you sit down to eat. Another big reason why I advocate patients cook their own meals, other than knowing what's actually going into your food, is because when you're cooking, you can put on some music, you can hum, you can sing, you're smelling the food, you're beginning to salivate, and basically you're priming your digestive system to digest that yummy meal. You also want to try to be very present when you're eating. You don't want to be very distracted, kind of on the go, working, texting, taking calls. You want to be very present. You want to look at your food. You want to taste your food, and you want to chew your food. Which brings me to the next step. Chew your food, people. You really need to chew your food so thoroughly until it's almost liquid before you swallow it. So with little kids, I tell them count up to 20 chews before you swallow your food. Oftentimes we're so hungry, the food tastes so good, we just want to chew 2-3 times and then swallow. That's really not good, because basically if you're not chewing your food thoroughly, that's more work your stomach has to do to break that food down, and that can potentially lead to some indigestion. My next tip is you might want to reduce the amount of liquids you're drinking around your meal. So the more you drink right before or during your meal, the more diluted your digestive enzymes become. We want those digestive enzymes to be nice and concentrated. We want an acidic environment to really break down that food, especially if you're having any sort of protein. So small sips are fine when you're eating your food, but try not to down a glass of water during or right before your meal. Again, a couple of sips are fine, and then maybe wait an hour or longer if you want to have a really good sized glass of water. My next tip for improving digestion is spacing out your meals every 3 to 4 hours. The longer you can go in between your meals, the better. The reason is because when you don't have any food in your stomach, that sends a cue from your brain and your stomach to your small intestine to activate peristalsis. Peristalsis is a contractions that occur in your small intestine to move the food through the intestinal tract. If that's not occurring efficiently or continuously throughout the day, food is just going to kind of sit there. It's going to allow bacteria to come in, feed off that food, and create other problems. This is when you can run into things like SIBO or small intestine bacteria overgrowth, where you're experiencing uncomfortable bloating, gas, heartburn, reflux, that sort of thing. So again, I recommend spacing out meals 3 to 4 hours in between. No grazing, no snacking, just liquids. My next tip, and this one is especially good if you suffer from heartburn or reflux, but posture. So I'm kind of guilty of this when I sit down to eat and I don't have a backrest. I'm kind of eating like hunched over like this. That's kind of impinging your esophagus and your stomach. So food is not going into your stomach as good as it should be. So you want to make sure that you're just kind of sitting upright. You're not hunched over. You're definitely not laying down. So posture is another thing to think about when it comes to improving digestion. This next tip has a little bit to do with the prior tip regarding meal spacing, but I really recommend not eating 3 hours before bed. It's the same deal. You want to prolong that fasting window so your small intestine and your colon can do everything it needs to do to process the food from the day before you eat again the next day. Not eating close to bedtime is also really good for improving your sleep quality and regulating blood sugar. So yes, try not to eat at least 3 hours before bedtime if you can help it. If you can't do 3 hours, maybe stop 2 hours before bedtime. The last tip I have for you is go for a short walk after your meal. Even if it's just a 5 or 10-minute walk, that's really good to help walk off your meal. It will help stimulate your digestion. It will level out your blood sugar. You might feel just less full and yucky and bloated. So that is my last tip. So those are all the tips I have for you all. I hope you found that to be helpful. And sure, a lot of us may know this, but you want to make sure you're actively doing this on a day-to-day. Let me know if you're doing any of these or if you start to do any of them and if you notice a difference. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you all next week.